All right, we're going to take a little tour of Lightroom and kind of get to know the interface a little bit better and learn a little bit more about it. So to start off, I'm going to go into my folder that I've saved on my hard drive. This could be on your external hard drive, your flash drive, wherever you saved it for when we set up our initial catalog. So I'm going to go into that folder and I'm going to find my catalog file. There's all kinds of files that are inside of this folder that Lightroom utilizes in order to run correctly. But the one that we're really concerned with is the one that we named and that it ends with .lrcat. That's the Lightroom catalog. And I can just double click on that and that will launch Lightroom and open up the catalog that I want to have open. So now that Lightroom is open, I'm just going to kind of walk you through a little bit. I think we may have covered a touch of this last week, but I really want to just kind of show you all the ins and outs of what Lightroom has going on. So this is the basic layout, the basic module, they call it. It's the library module. And in the library module, that is where we can deal with all the organization of our files and our photos. And so if we kind of start over here on the left, we have a navigator, which shows us the image that we're looking at. So if we're zoomed in, it'll show us what part of the image we're zoomed in on. And I'll show you how you can go into a loop view on your photos and have an enlarged vision of them. And below that, it kind of gives us the stats for our catalog. And we're sitting where we were last week, which is we imported our 20 photos. And so our previous import was 20 photos and all of our photos in the catalog are 20. Obviously, these numbers will change as you use Lightroom more. And you will kind of see how they change and be able to kind of monitor what's going on in your Lightroom. Below that, we have our folders. And I think we talked about this last week when we were bringing in our files, is that the folders represent the physical locations where our files or our images reside, whether that's on our internal hard drive, an external hard drive, or wherever they are. These folders represent that. So you can see mine are on my Macintosh hard drive, and they're in a folder called Photo 180 Main. That's my main photos folder. And then they're in a subfolder of that has the date -LR demo. And so that is the physical space where they reside. And images can only reside in one physical space. They can't be in multiple folders. We're talking about a singular image, and so that image resides in one of the folders. Below that, we have collections. Now, we're going to talk about collections in a demo that's coming up, but collections are sort of a virtual folder. You can put images in more than one collection, and you can utilize them to kind of show or gather images together that may not reside in the same folder, may not be from the same shoot or assignment or folder of images, but you can put them together into collections so that you can easily access them and see them. And like I said, we'll talk about those in a little bit. Right below that is publishing services, and this is sort of services that are tied to Lightroom that you can push your images out to. There's a lot of them that you can get. You can download them. Some of them cost money. You can play around with those kind of on your own. What we're going to use the most when we're getting our images out of Lightroom is the export button right down here in the bottom corner, right next to the import button. We talked about the import button last week. So import and export are down here. Along the bottom, we have what's called our film strip or our thumbnails of our images. And you can see I have multiple monitors, so it shows me both monitors on there. There's some other sort of settings down here, and we'll talk about those kind of as we use them. In the center of your image, we have our preview pane. And now, sometimes people like to look at their preview pane without all of this extra stuff that's around it. And so each of these side panes and the top panes have these little triangles off to the edge. And if you click on that triangle, it'll sort of disappear those panes. And so you could, if you're just sort of editing, and we'll talk about editing and rating and color coding and flagging our images in a demo that we're going to go over in just a few minutes. Sometimes people find it easier to do that without all that other stuff that's around it. Now, the other way that you can kind of turn those on and off quickly is with the tab key on your keyboard. And so I'm going to open them all up, and you can see that everything's open, and if I hit tab, it disappears the two side panels. And so I can kind of quickly do that. Now, the thinking of just disappearing the two side panels is that up here at the top, we have all of our modules that we like to use. And so we keep the modules up so that we can see them, and they keep the film strip up so that you can utilize the film strip. So I'm going to bring those panes back for right now, and I'm going to show you sort of another way that we could use that. Down here is our loop view where we can zoom in on an image, and if we want to have a little bit more space, we can hit tab to kind of give us more space, and then we'll be able to kind of click along our thumbnails to sort of scroll through our images and take a look at them. So there's some of the thinking with that. There's an XY component where we can do a select and a candidate, and we'll talk about that more in future demos. There's a setting here where you can look at more than two images together. They call it survey view. There's face identification. There's sorting modes and where you want, how you want to sort them by capture time, added time, edit time, all of that kind of stuff. There's a slider over here to change the size of the thumbnails so that you can see as many images as you want to see on the screen. And so that center section is all our sort of preview. At the top here are different ways that you can sort of filter your images. We can filter it by text, so you can type in a text string here. You could do it by attribute, which are things that we're going to talk about in that demo that's coming up, where we can rate them, we can color code them, we can flag them. There's metadata. We're going to talk about metadata in an upcoming demo as well. We can add all sorts of data to our image file that makes them more searchable and filterable. Or you can say none and it'll get rid of that. On the right side, we have a histogram, and we're going to talk a lot about histograms in this class, but basically it is a distribution of pixels from 0, black here on the left, to white, 255 here on the right. And so it shows you kind of where all the pixels are in any particular image that you have selected. Below that is a quick develop, and we're going to talk about develop, the module, and quick develop next week, and so you can kind of hold off on that. Below that is keywording, and I'm going to talk about that in another demo as well that's coming up. And then keywording lists, and then there's our metadata tab. And any of these can be open and closed by clicking on the triangle next to them. And I'm going to do a whole demo on metadata, setting it up and creating presets. There's some buttons down here where you can sync the settings. So if you change the settings on a particular image, you can synchronize that across multiple images. So that's our library module. We can change to different modules, and they look similar, but they're a little bit different. So if we switch to the develop module, which we're going to go into great detail next week, you can see that it changes up, and we no longer have our folders over here. We have presets over here. We have a history pane, and we have collections. And so this is another reason why putting your images into a collection can be nice, because in the develop module, you don't have access to your folders. You can see whatever folder you came into the develop module on, but it's not very easy. Actually, it's not even possible to switch to another folder from within the develop module. You have to go back into the library module and then make the change and then come back into the develop module. There are a few other, let me tell you, the right side has the histogram again. And then we have what it calls the mask modes, which we're going to go into detail in a couple of weeks. And then it has the develop settings down here, which we're going to talk about next week. There are a ton of settings here, and so we'll go into great detail on that next week. The next tab over is the map. If your camera has GPS, then your images will have a location in the metadata, and Lightroom will map all of those images out. It can be useful or interesting. We're not going to go into too much more detail on it than that. There's also a pane here where you can, or a module here where you can set up a book. And this works with blurb books or blurb publishing. And what it wants to do is sort of put all of your images into a book. You can change the layout, you can customize the layout, and then you can send your book to Blurb and pay to have it printed. We're not going to do much more than that in this class on books. There's also a slideshow module, which will sort of do a similar thing, which is take all of your images and create a slideshow out of them that you can then export out of Lightroom. And then there's a print module, and we're going to go into some detail on the print module, and I'll do demos on that next week as well. We will use the print module to make contact sheets to see multiple images on one single page. And so there's plenty of settings on here that we'll talk about next week. There's also a web module where you can make sort of a little web preview. And if you have a website or a place to publish a website, then you can push this little gallery out to a website, and then people can go and look at your images there on the website. We're not going to do much more than that in this class on webs. And then there's cloud storage. So Adobe Creative Cloud subscriptions come with cloud storage. I'm not sure with the school subscription how much cloud storage you get, but if you had a personal subscription, you could pay for more cloud space if you wanted it, and you could house some of your images and other information there, and then it would kind of follow you from computer to computer and be accessible to you on your mobile device and everywhere else. So really in this class, we're going to deal with the library module, the develop module, and the print module.